passenger kindly?
Hi there, Presley here. A new Bioshock game is officially in production. The last Bioshock game, Bioshock Infinite, was released in 2013. It wasn't until late 2019 that an announcement was made by 2K Games that a new Bioshock game is in production. 2K Games announced that the newest addition to the franchise is being developed by its new studio, Cloud Chamber Studios. The game is expected to be in development for the next several years. Let's have a look at what could be included in Bioshock 4. But before we get started, I would just like to say, to keep this channel alive, would you kindly like, share, subscribe, but most importantly, enjoy. You can also follow me on Twitter at _Pres1990. I post up-to-date gaming news as and when I receive it. On a side note, I made a Bioshock fan film several years ago that I decided to make private due to a copyright warning. Let me know in the comments section if you're interested in me making that video public. So, without further ado, let's get straight into it. Firstly, on a general note, Bioshock 4 should be a soft reboot for the series. The first 3 games rounded off an excellent trilogy. However, it's only a matter of time before the same formula becomes tiresome. Certain elements will of course stay the same, such as atmosphere and themes. There is always a lighthouse, there's always a man, there's always a city. But Bioshock 4 needs to bring fresh ideas to the table, especially in terms of gameplay. One of the most appealing features of the Bioshock franchise is the location. Who can forget that first descent into Rapture from the original game? Or the first ascent into Columbia? According to job listings for Cloud Chamber Studios, the game will be set in an open world. This is a step in the right direction as it will allow players to fully explore these breathtaking environments. As Rapture was so iconic, most fans would be excited to revisit Rapture as an open world to fully explore what the city has to offer. However, the job listing wanted someone who can breathe life into a new and fantastical world. This suggests that the next game will be set in a new location. All of the Bioshock games are set in a hidden utopia. Rapture under the sea and Columbia in the sky. Fans have theorized that the next game could be set on the moon. Given that Bioshock is set in an alternate history, this could be likely. Bioshock was set in the 60s. This was also the decade of the first moon landings. It isn't difficult to imagine that the moon was colonized in this alternate history. Another possible location could include a hidden city in the middle of the jungle. The various shades of green in the jungle would be a welcome change in visual style. Furthermore, this city could incorporate the surrounding wildlife into the gameplay. There could be wild animal attacks and monsoons where you have to take shelter in treetop buildings. There could also be survival elements such as hunting for food to stay alive. A hidden city in the desert is another possibility. The city could be hidden from the outside world by large sand dunes. Gameplay elements could include sandstorms. These can reduce visibility for the player and have hidden dangers lurking just out of sight. Sandstorms could also work to the player's advantage by providing cover to hide from enemies. Dehydration can also be a factor. The player could have to stay hydrated in the desert heat or suffer horrific hallucinations. This would fit well with the horror genre of Bioshock. Another likely location is an Arctic city. This may play similar to the Iceman section of Bioshock. The player would have to fight to stay warm as well as the terrors of the city. That incinerate plasmid will never be this valuable. Speaking of incinerate, another idea could be a city set in an active volcano. or even a city set deep underground. All of these theories have their merits, and if they aren't the setting for Bioshock 4, they could be interesting settings for future Bioshock games. The time period that each Bioshock game is inspired by has a huge influence on that game's visual style. For example, Bioshock was set in the 1960s, but it was inspired by 1920s and 30s design. Everything from the in-game posters to the dress style of the characters indicates an early 20th century time period. Bioshock Infinite continued this trend and was set in 1912. Again, the visual style was inspired by early 20th century. It would be interesting if Bioshock 4 was set in the late 20th century. This is hinted at in Bioshock Infinite when Elizabeth opens a tear to the 1980s. The 80s had a unique visual style, and it would be interesting to see Bioshock's interpretation of this. Other potential time periods could include the 19th century or even the present. However, these come with their limitations. The further back in time the game is set, the less likely it is, technologically speaking, that an advanced city could be built somewhere remote. If the game was set in the present day, it would take away that fantasy of escapism, of exploring an alternate history that Bioshock does so well. Whatever the time period for Bioshock 4, the game should keep that early 20th century inspiration or risk losing the trademark Bioshock style. If Bioshock 4 is set in the same time period as previous games, it will open up the possibility of returning characters from those games. Characters that are open to return in future games include Bioshock 2's big sister, Eleanor Lamb, Rosalind and Robert Lattice, Bioshock Infinite's quantum physicist twins from alternate universes, the geneticist who discovered Adam and mother to the little sisters, Bridget Tannenbaum, or even Jack, the protagonist from the original Bioshock. Although it would be nice to see familiar faces and references to the previous games, it would be really refreshing if Bioshock 4 rebooted the series with a clean slate. This way, fans can look to the bright future of the series rather than its past. One of the reasons why the Bioshock franchise has been so successful is because of its exceptional stories and genius storytelling throughout the series. If Bioshock 4 does make an open world return to Rapture, this limits the options for new and exciting stories. However, one interesting story that is available is the rise and fall of Rapture through the Civil War. The protagonist can be a talented young scientist or artist who has been invited to the new city of Rapture. The player can experience the start of the Civil War and choose a side, Andrew Ryan or Frank Fontaine. This will allow different factions with different play styles, as well as multiple endings. The game can keep the horror genre, but make it a psychological horror. At some point during the game, the protagonist becomes addicted to Adam. This side story can follow the player's descent into becoming dependent on Adam and eventually becoming a splicer. Whatever the story of Bioshock 4, one thing is for sure, to keep with the trend of the previous games, the game will need a brilliant twist. Unfortunately, Ken Levine, the creative director of Bioshock and Bioshock Infinite, will not be working on the next Bioshock game. Regardless, Bioshock 4's new blood talent are likely to deliver something spectacular and unique in its own right. Well, there you have it for part 1. I am making a part 2 follow-up to this video where I will discuss the other aspects of Bioshock 4. Take care, and I'll see you in part 2.